that's Brian's. And so I twisted Brian's.
I thought they were going to put that here. So that'd be kind of a cool photo. I brought it on a thumb drive in case they want to do that.
Had to park our car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out if we need to cover up that.
That's what those things are for. I just don't know how you pick them
Or
up.
why tape? I think we just taped them before.
Oh, is that right? Okay. You tape it to the wall.
Were you there yesterday? I was gone to a meeting one day.
I guess it's just a generation.
Is that right?
I think we're much more.
So I'm thinking.
She has a lot of business for herself.
Wonderful. And it was a farm. And after 4 years, so they sold it. Yes. So after they did the connection. Yeah, our bartender and I it's always been a mystery. It's unverified. We love it. So we'll keep saying it until we find the document and
Someday she'll call.
that's right. And then it will be that. So less fiction at that point. Yeah. Less fiction at that point. Yeah. Yeah, they'll be all fiction.
That's it. So all that's left. Huh? That's going to take them. Because I saw one of the engineers, not from the city, but he seemed like kind of a bureaucrat. And seepage, and then if they take it out, then there's a void there. And so the sidewalks will stop. He's been there since 1961. What?
Construction closed down.
Oh, yeah. Right. Start, I'll keep my eye on
Police chief is right back there. He's going to be.
Had a jackhammer. I know where Brian's live.
How are you?
I'm taking tickets. There's no
I'm signed up.
admission.
No tickets, I know that.
We're collecting money as you come in, but
$10.
Melinda won't be there. But how are you? She will not.
That's Michael Brennan.
What are you, the publisher
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You wouldn't mind reaching out to us? You have a card?
You know I don't right now.
So just send me an email one of these days.
Okay, I will. Yeah,
We'll connect.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. All right. Yeah, I got a lot of stuff around here.
You have to go see what the classic car.
I moved my seat that I was sitting in last time.
The bench.
The bench.
The wooden bench. We're hoping to repurpose it into smaller pieces. So we'll see if that happens. You come through this way?
Can I get a photograph?
Pardon me?
Okay, so that's perfect. I know. And then the other thing is, it's
Let's go ahead. I'm pretty sure brother have a boy. And Sharon asked her later when she was at the because I guess you're involved with it.
There's 18 years old, just like these kids out here.
Say again? Well, this one has a very, very high ASL. That's why I bought it, because a lot of what I do is Balboa Island.
that's so beautiful. Oh my God. That's what we're trying to do. That's my dream.
Four songs, went to Vietnam. I was limiting by what I was doing.
Right here, or over here?
In the same way.
You want to say hello there?
So we'll say hi to
I would try this again. Oh, I think
Who brought Ralph? I wonder. We're going to run out of seats.
So how long
From here?
I don't know. She said she Hey, hi.
we used to come down in summer, so the summer was probably like 78, 79, probably 76, 77. And I'd come in and get all over the place. Yeah, I love it. Ride my bike everywhere.
I don't know where you're going to put your pictures.
Otherwise, I'd
Well, they can ride homes too.
I finally got the coffee going. Do you want cream in it or what? Come and black? You want it to warm you up? It might be too much. You know Penny and Ralph?
So much.
Yes.
And I do take
What I'd like to do is when you start sending Hey, how are you? I don't need to do a story. Yeah. Yeah.
And this might be, I can get it from here.
Hi. We're turning sideways this time. Hi. Okay, I think Daddy. Here, Daddy's over here to the right. Hey Ralph, how are you? I'm glad you're here. This is pretty good, huh? All these, I think we're well protected.
You guys are all great. First year, second year, and the third year was this past year. And I agree with really good people, guys. Supporting it. Very popular. Pretty big even this first year. But it's every year it goes together.
Welcome.
It's really special
Welcome
for
to
him.
our ninth, I don't want to say annual, it's semi-annual, speakers event. And we couldn't be more proud or happier to have our police department here. We'll do some introductions shortly, but I just want to make a mention that Ellen Goodman, wherever she is the one who put our event together, our event chair. And Jennifer is going to take the program from here and make the introductions. Anyway, thank you again.
Thank
for joining us this evening. We are just so pleased on the attendance and just you taking the time to honor the department. It's truly a night to remember a long history of service to this community, and so each of these members are esteemed leaders of the community, and they're taking the time to share a moment of history with us. And so we're going to begin our program with the lieutenant. I'm going to introduce him here, and he has an array of things that he's done for the community. He's been with the department since 2014. He works as a watch commander in the patrol division. Lieutenant Rasmussen is actively in the Area 3 commander, which includes Balboa Island, so he's specifically serving here. In addition to supervising his patrol team, Steve supervises the department's Reserve Officer Program, Police Explorer Program, which some are here this evening. Thank you for joining. The Chaplain Program, Security and Police Information Network, and the Crime Suppression Unit. He was sworn into the law enforcement career at the LA County Sheriff's Department in 2000 and was hired in for this local department in 2001. Prior to becoming involved as a patrol officer, he has an array of background as an accident investigator, economic crime detective, patrol sergeant, detective sergeant, and special investigations unit. So truly, you can see that there's reasons why he's here, and among all of his duties, he's married and has 2 children. So thank you for serving your family, thank you for serving our community. Thank you for being here.
First off, thank you so much for taking your evening out and coming out here. I've got several people I'd like to acknowledge as well. First off, Chief Lewis, thank you for coming, and we're going to be hearing more from Chief Lewis here at the end. Just a couple people I'd like to mention. First off, Lee and Sue Pearl, thank you for coming, the president of the Balboa Island Improvement Association. I'd also like to acknowledge Jeff and Sally Herdman. As we all know, Jeff is running for District 5 coming up here in November. And the Balboa Island Museum and Historical Society, they're the ones that are the reason that this event is occurring tonight. I'd like to recognize President Shirley Pepis, Executive Assistant Ellen Goodman, and again, Museum Director Jennifer Keel, who is serving. Thank you again. Also, in putting this all together, I'd like to thank our volunteers in policing, Marty Flink, thank you, along with Michael Pascarian, Judy Johnson, and Dennis Biggs. They're the ones that brought out the antique police car for you guys to enjoy tonight, along with our police explorers, Sam Esparza, Sam Nielsen, Liam Gassler, and Adam Fishwalker, whose father is a lieutenant with us, and he is here as well. Thanks, guys. With regard to the display, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to go inside to see the display, the static display of memorabilia as well as the video. That's all due to Stan Berry from the DA's office. We'll be talking a little bit about Stan. Thank you, Stan, for coming out tonight for your contribution, as well as Stan Bresser, who's on our panel tonight. So he's also responsible for putting a lot of this together and coordinating along with Ellen Goodman. So thank you all. Real quick, regarding Stan, I wanted to, Stan Berry that is, I wanted to talk about him a little bit. He's a supervising investigator. He was born and raised in the Orange County area. He's almost 19 years of law enforcement experience. He's currently supervising investigator at the Orange County DA's office. As a hobby, he collects, preserves, and displays police memorabilia related to the Orange County law enforcement community. He's provided displays for several law enforcement related events, such as the displays he provided tonight, and his ultimate goal is to open a police museum highlighting Orange County law enforcement. So thank you again for preserving history and your efforts, and I appreciate you. And I'm going to cover the panel speakers. Again, we'd be here all night if I was going to cover all of their accomplishments, but I'm just going to briefly touch on them so you can get kind of a feel for who we have here tonight. The first, again, is Stan Bresser, who helped contribute some of these items and put this event together. Stan was raised in Coldwater, Michigan. When he was 13 years old, he attended the 1953 National Boy Scout Jamboree, held in Newport Beach, just up the street. You guys might now know why the Jamboree Road is named after the Jamboree. And another interesting little tidbit about Stan, his campsite is where the Newport Beach Police Department sits today. So he was there first, apparently. So I think he's got us all beat. Stan's next visit to California was in 1955 when he moved to California with his father. He remembered his dad checking at the grocery store on Balboa Island for a possible job. Stan went back to Michigan, finished high school. Stan married his high school sweetheart, and a year later they had a son. In 1959, Stan packed up his family and moved to California, where Stan got a job at the Jolly Roger restaurant, Costa Mesa. He then transferred to the Balboa Island store. So he's got quite a history even before becoming a police officer and an investment in this community. In August of '63, Stan joined the MBPD after running a red light and making the acquaintance of a diligent Buena Park police officer who stopped him for the violation and told him all about the job. So Stan never had any previous interest in law enforcement, but the police contact made an impact on him, and he went down to the MBPD and applied. Once hired as a police officer, I think that took about 2 weeks, Stan, somewhere in there? Yeah, 2 weeks, there you go. Stan still worked part-time for 2 years at the Jolly Roger because his pay as a police officer was $300 less than his pay at the Jolly Roger. And Stan retired from MBPD 30 years later in 1993. During his career, he worked patrol, motors, community relations, and warrants. Stan also worked as our police explorer advisor for over 20 years. After his retirement, Stan worked as a reserve officer for a time, and he also started the Newport Beach Police Department Retirees Association in 2002, and he's maintained his position as president of that organization, even still to today. Stan has been married to Judy, who's here today. His childhood sweetheart, of course, for 59 years, and they have 16 grandkids and 5 great-grandkids. So there you go. Now we're moving on to Sergeant Mike McDonough. All right, so Mike moved to Newport Beach from New York in 1958. He attended Ensign Middle School and Newport Harbor High School. He decided to work in law enforcement while he was in high school. He studied administration adjusted at Orange Coast College, and that was in '65 and '66. And in 1967, just prior to turning 21 years old, he started applying at police departments, but with a 1A draft classification, he couldn't get hired. At the time, MBPD Lieutenant Lauren advised him to get his military service out of the way and reapply after his service obligation was complete. So Mike did that. He volunteered for the draft, was trained as a military police officer, and went to Vietnam in '68, '69. Upon discharge of his services as an MP, he enrolled in college and reapplied to MBPD. He was hired in 1971 and attended the LA Police Department Academy. Sergeant McDonough worked all 3 divisions, so patrol, detectives, and traffic during his 30 years at MBPD, and he retired in January of 2002. Sergeant McDonough's family has continued the tradition of working for the city of Newport Beach. His son and my friend, Brian McDonough, is here tonight. Is a fire battalion chief at the Indy Fire Department. So thank you again for being here, Mike. And last but not least, Chief Neil Purcell. His law enforcement career began in 1861 as a reserve officer in the Newport Beach Police Department. He became full-time in 1964. In 1968, he laterally transferred to Laguna Beach Police Department, and he received some notoriety for a narcotics-related arrest of Dr. Timothy Leary. The infamous Harvard professor who advocated for the experimentation of psychedelic drugs. This arrest resulted in a conviction of 10 years prison for Dr. Leary, who started his sentence in 1970 until his escape later that year, and subsequent recapture after an international extradition, which I just heard from Chief Purcell that he was responsible for that. He came across some information on the travel plans. Where was that from again, Chief? Going to, where was he flying to?
From Switzerland to Kabul.
Afghanistan? All right. So that ended up getting him back into custody, and that was in 1972. But he was eventually released from prison on April 21st, 1976 by then Governor Jerry Brown. Interesting little history piece there. All right, so just finishing up here. Chief Purcell spent the next 28 years moving up the ranks at Laguna Beach PD, and he retired at the end of 1996 with 14 years as their chief of police. During his time as chief, Chief Purcell is credited with bridging the gap between police and the LGBT community, along with implementing community policing techniques that increase police visibility and made officers more accessible to the public and to residents. He also coordinated his efforts in combating the devastating Laguna Beach fires in 1993. Chief Purcell was also awarded Super Cop of the Year in the U.S. in 1873. And also after serving in Laguna Beach PD, he served as the Chief of Police for the city of Anderson, California from 2002 to 2006. Another little fact that I was just telling Chief Purcell is that the year before his retirement, I worked as a college intern at Laguna Beach PD under him in 1994. So that was my first stint in law enforcement. So it's a small world. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the three of them. They can go ahead and have at it.
Thank you. I think we're going to start out with Neil because he's been around law enforcement a couple long years longer than me. So Neil's going to tell you how he grew up.
Thank you, Stan. Well, my earliest, Stan said, well, when did you first meet a Newport Beach police officer? So I stretched my memory as far as I could. And the very first time I recall ever laying my eyes on a Newport Beach police officer was in 1944. Now it gives away, a lot of my age. But I was about 4 years, 8 months old, and there was a knock at our door. And at the time, my folks moved there from Orange to, which is now the oldest house, I believe, on Balboa Peninsula, at 1416 East Balboa Boulevard. And they've done absolutely nothing with that house but paint it. And where many others have been torn down and large homes have been put on these 35-foot by 60-foot lots. But it's still there today. It looks the same. But there's a knock on the door. My mother went to the door and she opened it. And I remember I was standing next to her. I looked up and there was a policeman standing there. But also there was another gentleman that had a steel helmet on. And that person said that the curtains in front of our house opened about 3 inches and light was shining out. Well, at that time, the history shows that Japanese submarines and whatnot were off our coast. And so all of us that lived close to the ocean had to make sure that their lights, their curtains were pulled shut. And also, like, your headlights just had tape across them with little slits in them, and you knew a car was coming towards you. And so that, and I remember the policeman looking at me, and he leaned down, and he shook my hand. And so it's just something I remember that's never gone on in my head. I'm not that old yet, that I guess where you start losing those thoughts. Then my next time seeing that I remember is 1945 when the war was over. World War II was over with. And my mom took me to downtown in Balboa, Maine and Bell. And there's just hundreds and hundreds of people around there. People honking horns, yelling, screaming that the war was over with. World War II was over with. And I remember the police there very well. They were actually throwing candy out to us kids. So those are the two things going way back when that I remember about meeting Newport Beach Police. Then I was dating a girl. She was 2 years older than me. I was 18 years old. And she'd already graduated from Newport Harbor High. And her dad was a police sergeant for Newport Beach. And of course, I was thinking I was going to be a minister, Methodist minister. And that's where I was aiming for. But the more I talked to him, the more I got more intrigued. And then one day, I wasn't going to school. I had to go to a dentist appointment. I was a senior at Newport Harbor High. And he came home from the morning watch, and it was 9 o'clock or so. And he's telling me and his daughter and her mother about two guys that burglarized a couple homes, and then they were caught in the act, but they were able to get in the car, and they took off like a bat out of hell, he said. Well, they didn't know too much that Balboa is a peninsula. And they ended up crashing their car at about F Street in Balboa, East Balboa Boulevard, and got out and ran. They captured one, but one was still loose. And so he told me that I'd probably be stopped by the police because they were checking all the cars going out, so I better leave early for my dentist appointment. And so sure enough, I got my car and I drove down and at F Street, there was a Newport Beach police officer, and he checked out the car and whatnot, said don't pick up anybody, just keep driving. This individual was still loose. So I drove about a block down and I said, I can't believe it. I just had this feeling I could find this guy. I know that sounds crazy, but I pulled the car over. Now I didn't walk past that officer, I took right along the water's edge back, and I knew that being a kid there, living the greater part of my life at that time, that there's a lot of homes that the wealthy people aren't there in the wintertime, but they have all these built-in little showers and dressing rooms and just in their backyard. H Street, and we went around the house and I heard so I figured, oh, he's there. So I come back around by the front door. Well, apparently someone else saw him and notified the police, and I could hear sirens coming. And so I'm there at the front door, and first comes up a police officer, and he's got a badge pinned to his coat pocket, and he was officer by the name of Johnny Bloom, and he was a juvenile officer. And he came up, and all of a sudden he saw me at the door of his house, and I went, well, like that, we've been there. And he says, come this way, come over. So all of a sudden the door opened, and there this guy was. Holy moly. Well, Detective Sergeant Bloom, he yells to me, get on the porch, get on the porch. And I just dropped down, and gunfire went back and forth between the two of them. And then the door slams. And then all of a sudden he says, kid, get the hell over here. And I ran over there behind the brick wall where he was. And shortly after that came a motor officer up. And he's just getting off his motor, and he looks up, and I see him draw his gun, and he fires at the individual in an upstairs window. And then the individual fires back, and he fires one more time. And then everything's quiet. Then the suspect came down to the front door where I was, and he opened the door, and he'd been shot. He's holding his arm, and he comes out. Well, what I'm getting to is that right after that, I had to ride in a police car to the Newport station, the old one on 32nd Street. And they wanted to interview me, and I interviewed. Then they were going to take me back. And we're walking in the hallway there, and Detective Bloom says, I want to introduce you to the police chief. So, oh, this is pretty good. Okay. Well, it was Johnny Upson, that was the chief's name. And he said, sit down. I sit down. And then he unloaded on me. You're the most stupid kid I think I've ever met in my life. What the H were you thinking about? And on and on. I mean, he was up one side of me and down the other side. And I just stood there, or sat there, and I said, well, you know, I know the peninsula well. I've lived there since I was 3, so I know. He just, it was then. He says, well, thank you, but don't ever be so stupid again like that. So they took me back. Then in 1961, because you had to be 21 years old to be a police officer then, I had the influence of my girlfriend's dad, and so I was sworn in as a reserve police officer. By who? Chief Upson. And he says, I'll never forget, he just looked at me and he says, well, at least now you'll have a gun. So that was my experience knowing Newport Beach Police at the time. Now there was times that if you could imagine a police officer doing this today, being a young kid down on the peninsula, there's only about, in the wintertime, about maybe 12 of us at the most that lived there. And so we all knew each other. And, you know, we'd do little pranks like ring doorbells and run off and this and that. And this one time we're down by the jetty, and they call it the Gillette House. And what it is, they're 2 big homes with a common built hallway that connects the 2 houses together. And it's still like that today. But we were messing around there, and all of a sudden the police show up. And so we were about, I'd say, 11, 12, and it's just getting dark and whatnot. And there was 4 of us. We went and we hung by our hands from the wall. And down below us is the bay, about 3 foot deep at that point. And an officer walks over there and he's looking around, and all of a sudden he looks down and he gets a little smile on his face, and he goes with his foot on my hand, bye-bye, boom. He went to the next one, bye-bye, boom. And he did that 4 times, and the 4 of us were in the water. And then we had to walk past that house and the next house, and there's the rocks to the jetty. That's how we got out. Another little thing the police used to do with us, when we acted up, and we always went to the jetty because that was the place to go. And so they would come down and they say, okay, if you don't knock this stuff off, you know, we're going to take your bikes away for good. But they put them in the trunk, and they'll say, you can find them at the Newport, at the Balboa Pier. Now you walk down there and you think what you've done, because we're tired of coming down there dealing with you guys. So that's what we'd have to do. So that was my introduction to the Newport Beach Police.
Well, like I said, I was on my way home from Whittier working for the Jolly Roger, and I got stopped. And I had never wanted to be a policeman. I had a blast working down here at the Jolly Roger in the summer. And he started talking to me about police work, and I had a friend down the department, and I called him up and said, hey, you know, what's the deal with this being a policeman? And so he came right over to the house and started talking to me, and I, having no desire to be a policeman, in 2 weeks I was standing in the Los Angeles Police Department Academy being screamed at for not being at attention and stuff like that. So it was quite a shock to me. But back then, when I got out, that was a 3-month academy, and it was a stress academy. We lost about 45 guys, or about 40 guys out of our academy, and so I was happy to survive. But when I got out, I started over at the 32nd Street station as a patrolman. A lot of people will say, you think you start out as a detective. No, we started out as a patrolman. We had about 39 officers at the time. The population was about 39,000. Seashore was pretty well, the apartments were there, but nobody lived there during the winter. You could go by and the whole street would be covered with dirt and dust and stuff like that. On morning watch, for example, back then we had 1 unit on the west side of town and 1 unit on the east side of town. And course, Corona Del Mar only went up to Goldenrod, but the west side was always pretty busy. We had a sergeant in the station, and we had on our little radios, you get a chance to see the radios in here, we had channel A and channel B, and that was it. We had one channel for talking to the station, and one channel if you wanted to talk to your partners. The gear, I brought my old motor jacket, which happened to be my favorite job ever, riding motors in Newport. I probably stopped some of you this year. I'm old enough to look around here, but this is my old motor jacket. But I wanted to demonstrate. Back then, we had a handcuff case, and we had this, which held 6 rounds of ammunition on each side, and if you had to reload, you opened the thing up, dumped the rounds into your hand, and then reload it. And we did that a lot at the range, and there were cases of shootings where officers were involved in shootings, and when they were done, they'd find their rounds, empty rounds in their pocket, because you didn't want to drop your ammo at the range, so you stuck it in your pocket. And when you got in a stress situation, that's what you did. You put your blanks in the pocket. So they retrained us on that. But I know there's a couple guys walking around here. One's the chief, but you can see that yeah, we all carried revolvers. We had to buy all of our own gear, which was a shock to my wife. I took a $300 a month pay, which you just mentioned to you, to be a policeman, and then I'd go home and say, oh, by the way, I have to buy a gun, clothes, uniforms, and all that stuff. A couple of my experiences. One day I was working with another motor officer. We were over on the B Street lot, and the SDS was picking up in the 60s. As a lot of you know, that's when kind of the marijuana, the drugs was picking up. The Vietnam War was creating all kinds of problems for everybody. We were standing on the sidewalk listening to the head guy from the SDS talking up on the stage, and every other word was an F word or a G word or. It was the Students for Democratic Society. I'm sorry. There was a communist group that was just trying to disrupt things. They were fighting about the Vietnam War and anything else they could think about. But they were up on the stage talking, and this one guy kept using all this profanity. There was a lady walking by, and I said, "Did you hear that guy?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, if you'd like, we could arrest him for profanity." Back then, we didn't have search and seizure rules. There was no, if I wanted to stop somebody, pull them over and search their car, we just stopped them, pulled them over and searched their car. We didn't ask, we just did it. She said, "Yes, I'm offended by that." So we went up on stage, me and John, and we arrested the guy and started off with him, and we got about halfway through this field, and we got jumped by, I don't know, about 40, 50 guys. All of a sudden there's piling on you and trying to take this guy away from us. So we were down on the ground fighting a little bit, and then all of a sudden I felt a weight lift off me and another weight, and I looked, I finally was able to get up, and it was the guys from 22nd Street that I probably sighted half of them at least once, but they were yanking these guys off me, and they were all pretty big boys, and telling them, "Hey, we'll be our own cops," and they beat them up and sent them on their way. So that was one of my good experiences. That reminded me to take good care of those guys from them on. So we bought them a keg of beer and dropped it off at their house. But police work was pretty exciting back then. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of guys out in the field, but we were pretty tight. And there was no search and seizure rules. If we wanted to, Mike will tell you what happens if you get boisterous during Easter week at a house. He's got a whole story about that. But we pretty much had free reign. If somebody ran in the house, we could just run in right behind them. And once we got in the house and people were drinking, then we could take action on all that kind of stuff and things. We did one other thing we did. We had a guy coming from Huntington Beach once, and it went out over the radio that they were in pursuit of a guy from Huntington Beach. So our lieutenant called all the units that he could find, and he said, "Everybody meet at the Huntington Beach Pier as fast as you can." So everybody roars over the Huntington Beach Pier, and he lined up the cars too deep across the bridge. And well, this guy never slowed down. He hit all the cars, and he totaled 3 of them, and 2 of them were pretty well banged up. But he came out fighting. And Phil Hall, who happened to be one of my training officers, and that's another story. Phil Hall went over and hit him over the head with his 6-inch Colt, and bent the post, the barrel on the Colt on the guy's head. That was all. That was all of that fight. It ended pretty quick. So yeah, there's as long as we're on Balboa Island, I used to really get frustrated on Balboa Island. There wasn't much crime here back then. There wasn't a lot of people here, to be honest with you. It was pretty light. But on the motor, we didn't have pack sets. Nobody had pack sets back then. That was prior to us having pack sets. So when you made a stop, you turned on your outside speaker if you were on a car. But on the motor, you just turned the volume up a little bit. And if you happen to be working on Balboa Island at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night, the radio would go up, and then all of a sudden the watch commander's calling you. I've got complaints about your radio being too loud on Balboa Island. You know, so we had to be really careful on Balboa Island. But luckily, crime wasn't too rampant. I'm gonna let Mike. I don't know how our time's going here, but I'm gonna let Mike talk here for a minute.
And when we're done, folks, we're gonna have some Q&A, so we'll have some opportunity to ask questions as well. Go ahead.
Well, Stan had mentioned how things were done a little different back then. When I was in high when I was in high school, a bunch of us had rented a place down on 46th Street for a month. It was a monthly rental, and on our 3rd night there, the officers had been there the first 2 nights for parties. On the 3rd night, they came in, took all of our property, put it out on the curb, and told us we'd been evicted. Took the keys and said if we'd gone back in, we'd be arrested. That was an eviction in the 60s. No 3-day notice, no procedures. You simply, we went to the owner of the place. I asked if we could get our money back. He said no, our beef was with the police, not with him. We had the house until the end of the month. If we wanted to take a chance going back in, we could, but we didn't do that. On Easter week, I was stopped down at Island and Bow by Officer Laughlin. He took our IDs. He was talking to us. He got a radio call. He told us, "You wait here till I come back." About 5 hours later, we walked down to the police station at 32nd Street. He'd gone off duty, still had our ID. We weren't going to leave Island and Bow until he came back and told us we could. We knew you didn't want to get in trouble with the Newport cops back then. I was hired in October of '71. After I got out of the military, went to LAPD for the 5-month academy. When I got back down here, my first day in patrol, well, I show up for briefing about an hour early because you don't want to be late on your first day of briefing. I bring all my stuff, I go in the back of the briefing room, set my stuff down. Officer comes in and says, "That's my seat." Pick my stuff up and move it. This happens about 4 times. No matter where I sat, the next officer was in, I was in his seat. Finally, I just pick all my stuff up, stand in the back of the room, watch commander and sergeants come in, sit down. "Aren't you going to join the briefing?" They were always, the new guy got it. My first shift, straight out of the box at 8 o'clock in the morning, my training officer, he says, "We're going to make a drunk arrest." Where are we going to find a drunk in the middle of winter, 8 o'clock in the morning? Just drive to the fun zone. I head down to the fun zone, take a left on Main, one of our locals, Corny Lynch, standing in the middle of the street in front of the pavilion, yelling at cars and heads. Larry says, "Get out of the car and go contact him." He walks out of the car with me, walks up to Corny and says, "Corny, this is Officer McDonough, he's new." Corny starts swearing at me, drunker than a skunk, 8 in the morning. My first arrest, 15 minutes out of the station. Back then, we booked our own prisoners. So you arrested them, you transported them, you took them down to the booking cage, and then you had to try and fingerprint them if they were able to stand up. Well, Corny was drunk every day. I think he was the training drunk for half the department. He had over 200 arrests. We had several habitual. At one point, judge ordered Corny not to come south of the Coast Highway as a sentence. We had one regular that was a painter, house painter, and anytime the jail needed to be painted, they'd arrest him. Judge Christensen would say, "How much painting do you have to have done?" And he would sentence him to the amount of time it was going to take to have the painting done. Paul could go across to the paint store across the street and sign for the supplies for the PD. He was authorized to sign for materials. He probably painted the station a half a dozen times at least. Whenever the cells needed to be painted, they picked him up and had him convicted.
Bob Hardy was going to try and be here tonight, but he's got a story about him. During Easter week, we'd stack beer cases and cases of beer along the walls in the police department. And by the end of the week, the whole police department was just full of cases of beer as high as as hard as we could pack them. Well, we came in one night with a van full of beer and all kinds of stuff, and they grabbed Corny and took him out back and put him by a drain and told him empty all the beer out of these containers. And so he starts pouring them out, and Bob Hardy comes back out later and he said Corny had tears going down his eyes because he's pouring, but he got even with us because he went in after he poured all the beer out and they threw all the trash away. He found a bottle of vodka in the briefing room that somebody didn't tag, and about a half an hour later he was stone drunk and laying on the floor in the briefing room. So he managed to. Well, we used to pick the drunks up and we'd run them behind to the beach, and then they'd pick them up and bring them back. Then they'd
When I hired on, we didn't have the pack sets, and in I think '73. We got our first issue of the Motorola pack sets. I was working patrol, and I made a stop at the cannery, which was about 100 yards from the police department. And the driver, he was a retired Marine hand-to-hand combat instructor and didn't want to go to jail. And the fight was on. Well, I'm trying to call the station with the pack set. I'm 100 yards away, could not carry. I could have thrown it and hit the dispatch window faster. The fight lasted about almost 10 minutes with two of us fighting him. Finally, somebody made a phone call to the station and they sent units over, most of them on foot, to assist us. The original portable radio looked like a shoebox with a crank. It was old military surplus that the sergeant would carry, and he'd show up, and if you needed to make a call, you had that, or you would go to a phone booth, called at the station and tell them what phone booth you were at, and they had a list of all the phone numbers for the phone booths, and they would call you and you could talk to the dispatch that way.
The last big Easter week that I believe we had there in Newport Beach before Easter week, Balboa and Newport and all was not the only place to go, but was in 1967, and we ended that Easter week up. I think was our highest number of arrests. We arrested over 1,300 people in that 9 nights and 9 days combined. I know I was on a 3-wheel motorcycle at the time. Of course, Stan was on 2, and I was the one with training wheels on it, as they call it. But I wrote 285 citations in that 9 nights. And that's a lot of citations. But that kind of climaxed the big Easter weeks that we had, where we arrested hundreds of, and like you say, like was said here, before the laws changed, I mean, you'd knock on someone's door and they even look like they're going to shut the door in your face. You were in there, and we just clean house, get people out, call the paddy wagon. X number of people are arrested, in they go. And
we tell the kids to wait on the curb, and they'd sit there and wait until the paddy wagon came by.
Right.
And a lot of fights after when parents would come to get them. A lot of fights.
So but as Stan was saying earlier, that changed pretty soon. The Miranda rights came out, where you arrest a person and you have to give them their rights, and they have the right to remain silent and all that kind of stuff. And the smart ones say, "You told me I could be silent, and I'm silent." And so it's really changed over the years, and it's for the better, I'm sure, because I don't think we could continue on the way we used to police here in this beach city much after about 1967. But we certainly had full support from the people. We did have one incident. It's called the Animal Farm, and it was a house that was up off of Superior Street by Hogue Hospital, and it was in a little piece of county property that was surrounded by Newport on one side and Costa Mesa on the other. But somehow, I don't know exactly how, it was determined that we, as a police department, because the sheriffs never came there, no matter what, they just never came. They didn't have any other property out, county property in that area. And so we were given a briefing by a captain and a couple lieutenants. They handpicked the officers that they wanted to go there and shut that place down once and for all. They made the mistake, or they didn't realize, but it ended up to be a mistake. The house was going to be bulldozed down as soon as the occupants were out of there. So, okay. So there was a group of us. We went up there. Well, there's about 75 kids. A lot of them drinking. You could smell pot all over the place. And we hit the place. And they're running all over the place. Well, a couple of the officers, I mean, they really got carried away. But the house was absolutely demolished by us. Toilets upstairs were thrown out the window. Everything.
Anyway, we got our job done. Well, I made some promises, so I'm sorry. We did have a little calmer, but we were pretty well known as a pretty bad bunch of cops, and tough. We didn't like people coming into our area that didn't belong there. And we had the Hessians try to move into Newport. We kept sighting them. They'd drive through, and they knew by the time they left, they'd have like 6 or motorcycle gang. It was like the Hells Angels when they were just getting started, and they were looking for a place to land. it's a place that they could take over and be the tough guys, you know. So we started citing them, and then I found out one night, we found out that they had moved into a residence on 1824 West Bell. That's 45 years ago. I still remember this. But we got briefed by the captain that we're not going to have any Hessians living in Newport Beach. So we went there, and about 5 of us, and we convinced them that they would never want to stay in Newport Beach. So they left. But I got to tell one story about Neil. Every time you stop somebody down in Peninsula, oh yeah, you know Chief Glavis, you know, and they never knew his name, but they always, you know, oh, you know Chief Glavis, you know. All the years I worked down there, I never arrested anybody where, you know, where they arrested and stick. I never got called in, hey, you know, you shouldn't have cited this guy, you know, he's my friend, you know, type of thing. Except once, and I was with Neil, and we had a guy that was a property owner down in Balboa, and he was a problem. He was always complaining, constantly complaining about something. So we went there and we knocked on his door about, I can't remember what the call was, that he was yelling at somebody or something. But we knocked on his door, and he had a long sidewalk, and so he opened the door, and Neil started talking to him, and I just stood there, and Neil said, Mr. Sill, we've got a complaint about you. You're screaming and yelling at people and stuff. And Neil stepped back off the walk and off the step, and Sale came out of his house, and he stood there, and Neil kept talking to him, and well, Mr. Sale, you know, we don't know what you're doing to him, and walked him out, and we just kept backing up, and finally we got out, and we hit the sidewalk, the main sidewalk, and Neil looked down and went, Mr. Sale, you're under arrest for drunken public. So by the time we got to the station, the phone was ringing, and it was the chief, and he said, let him go. And so that was the only rest of my whole career I had. Another thing, the chokehold was real common. It was taught in the academies. And of course, it had a lot of notoriety after a while. It became a hold that we couldn't use, but it was a lifesaver for a lot of us. So, like I said, I'm literally one guy on the east side, one guy on the west side, and if you got in a fight, a lot of times that was the only way you could put them down. But I got a call one day to help out at the pier at 22nd Street, back behind those buildings over the pier back there going into the bay. And I get there, and there's like 5 officers on this one guy. He was 7 foot tall, and he weighed 320 some pounds. And they're trying to take him into custody. He was drunk and disorderly, and they're trying to take him into custody. And he'd just take his arm like this and just throw you. And I was wearing all my gear. I had my motor boots, my motor jacket. I'm on a pier, water. You know, so I run around behind him, and I jump up and try and put a chokehold on him, and he just walked around like I wasn't even there. And so I could, you know, once I saw what happened, I know Rodney King thing was a big deal, but until you've tried to take a man like that into custody, it's pretty tough. There were 6 of us, and we just weren't even touching him, and all of a sudden he just stopped. And he said, okay, you got me. And we didn't have him. I don't know who he was looking at, but we didn't have him. So we tried to put cuffs on him, and we couldn't even cuff him. His wrists were so big around, the cuffs wouldn't even fit on him. So we just asked him if he'd please get in the car, and he did. Anyway.
Just one last thing. I know that we, said we probably look like a bunch of Keystone cops at one time. But, I'll say one thing. With the best thing ever happened in Newport Beach was the hiring of Chief James Levis. He was absolutely the best thing that happened. And he really transformed the police department. And I have the utmost respect for him. But all the game plan and things like that really came to an end. It was, there was a lot of officers that left the force at the time. That they just were used to doing things their way and being on the ship they want to be, and that's not the way it was. And this former LA captain did an excellent job, and I think it put Newport Beach Police Department really on the track to be what I consider to be the finest police department here in the state of California. There's no doubt about it in my mind, and I think a lot of other departments try to emulate what's occurred here in Newport Beach, and I think it's really shows, especially with the new chief that we have. I say we in Newport Beach now. One of Stan's proteges is a cadet, and come up through the ranks. I think it's just great that they've hired a homegrown person to be your new chief, and I think you'll be very pleased with him because he is a true professional of the new age.
Mics are quiet now. It's hard to get to talk. I don't know how we doing on time.
You want to do some question and answer? Sure. I can ask the crowd, if anybody, if they need a microphone, I can do it, or I can relay your question. Any questions? Go ahead, sir.
You said when you started there were 39,000 population and 39 policemen.
Yeah.
How does that ratio compare today? How many policemen do we have?
Well, we have 140, is it?
146, I believe.
Okay, and our population is like
About 70,000.
But you have to remember there was no Fashion Island. Chronomar stopped at Goldenrod, and there was nothing above there. And Balboa, a lot of time, most of like out on Seashore, those were summertime places. People came down here in the summer, but in the winter, it was pretty quiet here. But we had East Bluff started, back East Bluff was one of the first things, and of course, they started building more and more. So, but there were times where we had to call for help from other departments, and we were also on call to Huntington Beach, and we went to Huntington Beach a few times on riots in the 70s, 80s, and the big riots were hitting. And in East Weeks, we hired other departments to come in. The CHP came in and helped us, and they always took their badges off, so everybody would think they were Newport. And we also had Marines ride with us, which was pretty nice. The first time I was in the drum tank with this guy that we had a fight. He was a Marine, and we hated arresting him. Just hated to bring him in. So we'd always call the MPs so they avoid the criminal aspect of it. But this guy, we fought him into the drunk tank, and we got the door slammed, and a school Marine comes in. He's about 5'8", and I go, "This guy is something else, man." He says, "Open the door," and we go, "Okay, you ready?" And you open the door, and the guy came at him, and this Marine had a pair of black gloves in his hand, and just went like that and way up and hit this guy, and he went down like a lead balloon, man. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. I'd never seen sap gloves. They were lead gloves, and when he hit that guy, he just, it was all, the fight was over. But so in the summertime we had a lot of extra help. For the Easter week, what was the biggie thing, and then of course the 4th of July became the big thing, and we had to fence off. The other thing that Neil talked about is Newport. It just kills me when I watch these TV things with policemen standing over on the side, really maniacs. I'll be careful here what I say, but while these guys are tearing down their towns and burning their buildings, and these guys are lined up along the side of the road, just standing there. I mean, that would never happen here. That would never. It's so embarrassing to be an ex-policeman and see that. Glavis would have shot us all if we would. I really believe he would have. I mean, but we had a lot of riots here, but we got 1,300 people that one year, and always up to 1,000 every year that went to jail. And they knew if they came to Newport and raised, well, holy heck, the odds were pretty good that they were going to go to jail, and they did.
Any other questions? Go ahead, sir.
Two. One, what are we doing with mental patients and drunks and the kind of issues they're dealing with in Santa Ana and that's completely overwhelmed LA County? And two, what's the right thing for citizens to say to officers when we're pulled over?
Well, just to kind of give you the nature of the program, so we're covering history. The chief is going to talk about kind of present day law enforcement, what we're doing, and as well as what we're going to do in the future. But just to answer your question just briefly, regarding a lot of the quality of life issues, homeless issues, the police department actually has a homeless liaison officer that is partnered with social services where we can address a lot of these concerns and help them. Some of the problems nowadays, it tends to fall on the police, and we're always very resourceful in handling issues, and we're ready for the challenge. But some of those are the things that, like I said, it's getting a lot more complicated doing this job. But like I said, we're committed to the community and doing what's right by them. So, somebody else have? Yes.
I really have enjoyed your stories. Do you have any about Balboa?
He was still in grade school, I think. No, it was pretty much the same thing, just crowds of people. We started running more riots then. Easter week was very unusual. If you told a kid to sit down, he sat down. By the 70s, we'd tell somebody to sit down, and they would say why. And part of that was restrictions placed on the police department. We just couldn't do things like we had done in the past, or he'd be sitting down, you know. But we had some really bad riots out on Seashore. We put up fences so that people lived here at the time, but 70s, 80s, we put up fences so that they couldn't just walk straight down Seashore. I was involved in the first night that one of those hit, and boy, it was glass bottles full of sand coming at us and stuff. We just weren't prepared for it. But we made a lot of arrests that night, and we put a lot of people in jail. But yeah, it took a while. The thing that finally stopped all that was the rentals. The city went after. They're talking about the city went after the people that were renting the apartments and fined them huge amounts of money. If they recall, if we had to go to a place twice, we filled out a slip, and it went in, and these people were fined large amounts of money for renting to people that were disturbing the peace, and that really shut down the rentals. They quit renting to 15 or we'd have like, how many did you have in your party? 15, 16? I think that was there.
Any other questions?
Tell us a little bit about your arrest of Timothy Leary.
The question again?
Dr. Timothy Leary, your arrest.
I've been in Laguna Beach at that time about 3 months, 4 months, and it was the day after Christmas. And I thought, well, I'll make one more tour out the canyon into an area called Woodland Drive, which is some of the original homes, and it was the original place for the first Festival of Arts pageant show. I was told, I've seen pictures of it way back when, before their location now. There's a bunch of little houses, and they're real old houses. And there's no streets in front of many of them, just dirt paths. So it's just this little colony. And so I pulled in this one night. At that time, our shifts ended at midnight, so I thought, well, I'll just pull in Woodland Drive. It was 11:55 p.m. And I'll just make my little circle. And there was a station wagon came out and stopped. And I went to the right a little bit, but now I've got a telephone pole right square in front of me, and I can't go around the car because of the telephone pole. So I pulled it alongside, and I look, I flashed my flashlight in the driver's side of the window, and I see this gray-haired guy, and I see a woman on his right. But in the back seat, I thought it was a big dog at first, and trying to climb over the shoulder of the driver. And then I realized that's some kid, maybe 18, 19 years old type. And so I thought, what's going on here? So I got out, went over, and I tapped on the window. The gentleman rolls the window down, and I get this puff of marijuana, smell of marijuana, and I'm looking at him, and I said, can I see your driver's license, please? And I'm thinking, can't be. So he gives me his license and I look at it. Sure enough, Timothy Leary. And in those days, you didn't have a pack set radio you could talk to. You hung your microphone out the side of the door so you could quickly get it. Well, mine was inside the car still. So I backed in and I called him and I said, I need to follow up, a couple follow-ups now. And I told him where I was. So as soon as the first follow-up got there, I got him out of the car. And here it's Timothy Leary. They just dropped off his daughter there. And on the right side is his wife. And she's trying to put on, look like a rabbit purse on her head. And it keeps wanting to fall off. And the son, he's like an animal. He's been sweating profusely, his hair's all wet, and he's trying, just like a dog, trying to get over in the front seat. And I mean, he was just totally out of it. The other units got there, and I placed them all under arrest, and took them into jail. Now the kid, he was in our jail for 3 days coming down. At that time, you didn't take him to a hospital, you didn't do anything. We had a jail in Laguna Beach, so that's where he sat. In fact, the judge on the Monday morning, this happened on a Friday night, on Monday morning, there was somebody complained about, he was still in there. The judge wanted to see why we had this kid still in custody. And the judge, the courtroom was our city council chambers also at the time. So I walked the judge right on back in, and he looked at this, and the kid was just still out of it. I've seen enough. Now he went. So my arrest did stick with him. He'd been arrested 14 times, never convicted. The closest was an arrest in Texas, and he got no sentence or anything. After he was sentenced by Judge McMillian, he was sent to state prison. He escaped 2 years later from state prison with the help of Bernadine Dorn, and he's a professor now. And his name escapes him right at the moment. But he's well known. He did some bombing himself in New York, and he's a real radical. Now, when he escaped prison with the help of those two, he was taken to Washington, the state of Washington. There they shaved his head, and his wife's hair was dyed bright blonde instead of reddish brown. And then they went from Washington to New York City to across the borders to another Black Panther person, and he was there in Algiers for 2 months. And this guy, he couldn't stand any longer, and he was sent to thrown out of that country, and he went to Switzerland with Rosemary, his wife, and that's where we remained for a couple of years. Well, Switzerland, we had no agreement with them, and there was no way that we could ever have them arrest him and we could pick him up and this and that. I was still working narcotics, and my partner and I took down an apartment in Laguna, and lo and behold, it's his son-in-law, and there's a little month-old baby there. And he'd married Larry's daughter, but she wasn't there, and he was a nervous wreck. He'd been smoking a joint, a marijuana cigarette, and so, and I knew who he was and how he was related to Larry, but I did a little prowling around, and in a closet in a dresser I found a letter from Larry from Switzerland to David, and I read the letter, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I thought, this might be our chance to get this guy. Larry said in his letter that he would be going on such and such date, not with Rosemary. She had left him, but with another woman girlfriend that he had over there. He'd be going to Kabul, Kabul, Afghanistan on such and such date with such and such plane and this and that. And so I left a letter there, but I wrote down all that information. The very next morning, I called the feds and told them, this is what I have and whatnot. Sure enough, just like clockwork. They did have a agency in Kabul at the time, the federal narcotics did, and they never let them off the plane. They refueled that plane, flew them, I believe, to England, from England to New York, New York to LA, and I got to say hi to them again.
A couple more questions, then we're going to be moving on to Chief. Any other questions? All right, Chief, you have the floor. Chief Lewis.
All right, thanks, Steve. I guess while we're telling stories about how we ended up at the Newport Beach Police Department, first I want to point something out. Okay, so we've heard some stories about, all right, Chief Purcell gets to arrest the, I guess we can call him a high-profile political figure. I mean, you talk about Tim McDouleary, right? I get Dennis Rodman. Times have changed a little bit, right? I guess the talent's changed a little bit. So, that's a great story. Dealing with Dennis Rodman's not. In fact, I saw him the other day. I was at Cappy's having breakfast, and he walks in. I hadn't seen him in years. Hey, how you doing, Chief? All right, Dennis. Nice to see you again. So, we'll talk about how we ended up, how I ended up at the Newport Beach Police Department. So it's true. We all knew that if you grew up in Orange County, that the police department in Newport was one that you were not gonna play around with, and I was one of those. I grew up in Orange County, I didn't grow up in Newport, and I specifically stayed out of Newport because I was going to end up with Sergeant McDonough's revolver bit on my head, or one of the Chief's 281 tickets she wrote in 5 minutes. Yeah, so I didn't come to Newport Beach, I wasn't going to mess with these guys. So I ended up, fast forward, I'm in college, and I'm at Long Beach State, and I'm walking across campus, and they have one of these recruiting fairs, and one of those kinds of deals where everybody's got their little things out, and this is the one and only time the Newport Beach Police Department did one of these recruiting fairs things at Long Beach State for students. And I'm walking through there in between class, and I see one of our investigators, Ron Ballerkamp. And if you know Ron Ballerkamp, he is, you look at your recruiting poster, Mr. Awesome. Big, handsome, resplendent in all of his police regalia, the whole thing. And I can barely even, get up to where this table is because it's surrounded by co-eds. And I thought, well, you know what? Newport Beach Police, all right? Maybe I can try something like this, right? So I make my way through there, and I grab a card for a part-time job as a police cadet with the Newport Beach Police Department, and I was hired, 18 years old. Best of intentions, right? Next thing I know, I'm the chief of police. So it's it's been crazy.
There's stuff in there.
A little bit, and unfortunately, Sergeant McDonough, who was my sergeant on graveyards for many years, had something to do with that, kept me out of trouble, right? And along the way, and I'm grateful for that. So I tell our folks, yeah, well, thanks, you're very kind, and. I tell our folks sometimes too is that we got to remember we have a rich history and tradition at the Newport Beach Police Department, and I'm Generation X. I was raised by these guys, but then I'm also in a position now where our workforce is young. It's really young. We're bringing a lot of people in that are new to law enforcement, but they're new to Newport Beach. And really, I look at my job and I think you hear that expression. If it's because I see further, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants, and these individuals are them that have really developed what our police department is all about and how we got here today. So what I want to talk about is a little bit about where we are today. So what's the Newport Beach Police Department today? So we're an organization of about 250 folks, civilian and support staff. That's everyone from our park control officers to our dispatchers, our records clerks, and then our officers that actually work the street. And I'm included in that number as well. So a $52 million budget is what I have and what I'm responsible for. And so when we talk about community service, that's what we do at the police department. 80% of that $52 million is spent on people. Because that's what we do. We don't make anything. We don't sell anything. We provide a service. We're a people business. And that's what we've always been about here in Newport. So I want to talk about what the expectations of our police officers are right now. They're and they've changed. Expectations are different for us now. They just really, really are. And I don't know that they're fair, but they are what they are, and I don't get to set them. It's our community. It's our public. You hear some of the things that go on nationally about what the expectations of police officers are now, and they've changed, and they're high. They've always been high, but they're even higher now. And we really break it down to what we think, what a police officer does now and what we expect of them. Well, number one, we expect them to be brave. We expect them to be physically fit. We expect them to be expert tacticians. We expect them to be mental health experts. We expect them to be experts in the law. And then we also expect them to be able to react under stress, under difficult circumstances, in an environment where perhaps you're fatigued, in a struggle, and to make a good decision. And if you don't make a good decision, or maybe if you even made a good decision but it doesn't look very good, you get the opportunity of having yourself put on YouTube and blasted across the nation just like that, before you have a chance to even drive back to the police station. So that's what's different about law enforcement now. It's a challenging environment, and what we expect of our folks, it's like no other time in the history of our business. I don't have a teleprompter here, but I do have notes. So I mean, I guess. But again, it's more than just catching bad guys, and that's a fun part of our job. I mean, it is. That's what those stories are about. But we've evolved, and what we get to do here in Newport Beach, and what my job is, and really what keeps me up at night, is making sure that we're hiring the right folks. We have, and these gentlemen will tell you, you can't just walk in off the street and get a job as a Newport Beach police officer. And I'll tell you what, I will never hire anyone that I don't believe is going to meet the expectations and the standards that you folks have set for us. This is a premier police department, and we hire premier officers. And I'll just give you an example. So Lieutenant Rasmussen here is a Juris Doctorate. He's been very successful legal career prior to coming for us, and he's also been very successful in the private sector, running his law firm as well. Steve can do whatever he wants. He chooses to be a Newport Beach police officer and a leader in our organization. And I'm humbled that I get to walk along and serve alongside of not only just incredibly bright people like Steve, but people that care so much about this community and this department that they choose to be here. It's more than a job, it's a calling. Quality police work we talked about, it's more important now than it's ever been, because we are under a high level of scrutiny. So making a mistake right now is forgivable, but we have to understand that what we do and the quality of our police work is going to be something that we're going to be held accountable for in a very visible way. And these gentlemen will tell you, and something that I've always been proud of, is that the quality of police work that we do at the Newport Beach Police Department has always been second to none. And I validate this when you talk to the district attorney's office. They love us because we do quality investigations, we write good reports, and we make good decisions when it comes to arrest and not arrest. So we're not the police department that goes in and provides the district attorney with a problem, right? We provide these district attorneys with convictions. They love us. And I'll tell you what, it's not just the district attorneys. Talk to some public defenders sometime. Talk to the defense bar about what they see from the Newport Beach Police Department. I'll tell you what, there's some officers that are so good that when these defense attorneys see, okay, this is Officer Smith there, just go ahead and plead guilty. You're gonna lose. All right? That's how we do it in Newport Beach, and that's something to be proud of. I want to talk about teamwork for a little bit, and you know, crime has changed too, and the nature of crime and criminals have changed. And teamwork to us right now is something that we do really well in Orange County. I think across, just not police and fire, but across with our allied and with our sister agencies here, because crime's regional now. You know, it's one of those things where you know, courts don't know borders. I mean, they're not really. They don't know that Costa Mesa is on one side of Irvine and Newport Beach is on the other side. So it's important for us to work as a team with not just our local agencies here, but at the county and the state level to deal with the individuals, because those are the crimes that we're seeing right now. But it's more than just law enforcement too. When you talk about teamwork, I am a department director here at the Newport Beach Police Department, and we have a handful of incredibly talented department directors, and I'm a part of that team. But I also know, and what we've come to understand in police work, is that I can't do my job effectively. I can't provide public safety by myself. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. You know, we talked about a Harvard professor, another Harvard laureate, and UCLA professor, James Q. Wilson, one of the forefathers of public administrative thought, particularly when it comes to criminal justice. And James Wilson talked about the broken windows theory, and really what that is when you talk about broken windows and in a community, and what his in the layest of terms is, you have areas that are blighted. When you have broken windows, when you have graffiti, those are areas that you will see an increase in crime, because there's a sense of neglect, there's a fear, there's a sense of not being safe. And we've seen this theory be effective time and time again. And if you ever have a chance to read about some of the things that Rudy Giuliani did in New York and the way he was able to reduce crime, a lot of that was based on the broken windows theory. So my point to this whole thing is, crime prevention through environmental design is what we do now. I'm not somebody that keeps the streetlights on. I'm not someone that sweeps the streets. That's my public works department. Those guys are crime fighters, as far as I'm concerned, because I know the well-lit streets, clean center medians, taking care of what our city infrastructure reduces crime for me. Those are my teammates. Those are my partners. We talk a lot about crime rates and what we can do as police officers to affect that, and we can take people to jail. But at the end of the day, literacy rates are associated with criminal behavior, much more significantly than the deterrent effect that I'm going to have on arresting individuals. So guess what? Our library director, Tim Heatherton, is a great guy. He's my partner, and he's a crime fighter. So I'm part of that team, and this police department is part of that team. And that's what here in Newport Beach is something that's really special about the way that we collaborate, understanding that we are all part of this community. And for me, having the support to bring these crime fighters in, our librarians and our street sweepers, is something that's really important to me. But really, at the end of the day, it's about community policing. And these guys talked about it. So, we're not going and we're providing our knuckleheads a keg of beer anymore, right? when they help us out. Things have changed, but what has not changed is community police work. And while it looks like some drunks helping our coppers when they're getting somebody's getting the best of them out in the street one day, and everybody having a beer later, maybe that's the way it was in those days. In these days now, it's the same. It's the same community policing, but it's just we see it a little bit differently. I think you hear a lot of things, community policing, right? You hear about community policing programs or community policing unit. Okay, well, we don't have that in Newport Beach. What we have are officers that are the community. That is a distinctly different thing, and that is something that we here in this police department have always understood. We are the Newport Beach community, and that's something that that is unique and special, and something that I think all of us can be proud of, that we have that type of partnership here. And I'll tell you a story about this, where I am community policing, and the 4th of July, and we talk about the stand. I mean, there's a couple years we lost, huh? We lost, with these knuckleheads up there. I mean, can we say that? Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. It was absolutely nuts, right? So now, you think about that. That's our history in West Newport. Just about as out of control as you can possibly be down there. So we get together and we think, okay, well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make this better? And this isn't something that's just a police issue, right? This is a community issue. We need to make this better. And, a crazy idea comes up, says, hey, tell you what, we're going to have a family-friendly 4th of July. Really? Okay. We're going to have a family-friendly 4th of July, and in fact, what we're going to do is, we're used to shutting down Balboa and Seashore and all this other kind of stuff, but we're going to shut down Balboa and we're going to have a parade. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me, there's no way. We're not going to have a parade, nobody's going to come. I mean, and people are going to be throwing things at us, it's not going to happen. So we do it, and guess what, it worked. And this was something where you talk about, at the end of the day, everything that we do in community policing, the center of the bullseye here, folks, is trust, all right? That's what we do in this police department, all right? And we have to earn that trust, and we have to understand that trust is critical to what we do, and we have to spend every day reinforcing that trust. And the story that I'm telling about West Newport really is a story about trust, because those folks over there in that neighborhood understood the problems that we had year after year after year after year. They have to trust me to do my job, right? To make sure that we're going to have this parade, right? And we are going to solve this problem down here, because they're going out on a limb here, right? Because they're telling their neighbors, they're involved here, they're having some difficult discussions with folks on their streets about what's going to be expected down here in West Newport going forward. Okay, they have to trust that I'm going to do my job. And in that case, we did. And I get to lead the 4th of July parade every year down on the peninsula now. And I still shake my head, all right? Because I think about those days, Dan. And I think, my gosh, how do we get here? But again, it's about trust. It's about community policing. And really, that is the Newport Beach Police Department. I can tell you that this is a premier, world-class police department. And it's the efforts of these gentlemen, again, standing on the shoulders of giants, and the history, the traditions, and the legacy of some of the things that have gone on here. Truly, it's humbling. So, again, you have a world-class police department with world-class individuals, and I know as we move forward here in the future, there's nothing but even better and better things to come for our police department and our community. So I'm humbled to be your police chief, and I'm so grateful to be able to come up here and tell you a little bit about our police department tonight. So thank you very much.
All right, folks, hey, thank you again for being here tonight. I know that Stan, Mike, and Neil will probably over for a little bit, so if you have any questions you want to ask them directly, they'll be available. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to tell my wife that you said that
Oh my God.
Yeah, I can't actually. Why am I not surprised? You know what? Just say hi. You know, it's kind of funny. I know people sometimes do that. Honestly, it's always that sauce and things like that. It's so rare to have somebody that. It's probably a pretty good way to go. But every once in a while, you get something that says, yeah, I'm sure. But every once in a while, you get something that says, yeah, I'm sure. I went right through that stop sign. I'm sorry. You're so shocked by the honesty.
I'm Judy Stan's wife.
Oh yeah,
Stan
Judy.
Wrestler's wife.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, we've met before.
Hey, go Giants.
Nice meeting you. I'm not sure this is the year.
Yeah. We're the wild card team right now.
It's like an house.
They've come from that position a few times and won it all.
These guys are going to track me out. How are you?
That's awesome. That's great. Oh, okay. No, I was talking about that.
You know what? Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, unfortunately.
No, they're going to have one. Over here. Tuesday of October.
That was fun, huh?
Right, right.
Can I get you anything? Water, soda, wine?
Cookies? Help yourself.
I have some
It's like leashing your hair, you put sun in.
It's like all the. No, I haven't driven this far
Imagine if we still had these Michigan stuff.
Did you guys win?
Patrol cars.
The high point of our life. At the time, as long as we went.
Yeah, but this guy, he has all this stuff. His plan is to open a police museum in
Like all those county departments.
They're down in the
Such a great, great job. Yeah, I know. In the older days. Shirley. Oh, I know.
I thought those were like super old.
It's like, you never know.
Which I worry about any of they are.
Phone and I'm going to be good.
My name, telephone number, phone, email, and what I want to do. If I make
I've always wondered if you
I like your hair. Pardon me? I like your hair. Thank you very much.
What years were they
Get a call about a drunk playing.
Over 7 years. And so that got me very involved.
West Newport. Yeah, my wife.
Last thing I would call it, you have the generator, because the last time you and I could see their Wednesday with us, and that's the last time. It is, isn't it? Their personal story is quite a different department. Amazing. Not that many, it's under many years ago. Yeah, I've captured everything.
It worked out well. They're great storytellers. Yeah. I wasn't sure how they